you reach a point where you followed your passion as a wedding planner. You're like, this lights me up. I'm doing it. I love it. And then you get in business, you're sustaining yourself, you're even full time, and you're like, okay, where's the next level here, right? Like, how do I reach that point where I'm running my business and it's not running me? How do I reach a point where I'm getting the profitability that I want? Hey, everybody, this is Eddie Babbage, founder, CEO of Timeline Genius, your host here of the Wedding Industry Insider Podcast. I am here with Sam Sheehy. Sam is the founder of the Perfect Match Weddings, a full service wedding planning and design company based in New Hampshire and serving all of New England. Sam, thank you so much for taking time. I'm excited to have you on the show and to do this interview.
Thank you, Eddie. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
In the pre-interview, I told you, Sam, I just it happens. I've been doing this for years. I talk to people. I'm like, okay, it clicks. I'm like, I know we've got an awesome interview here. And just to give people a preview of what we're going to get into and what they're going to learn if they stick around, we're going to talk about scaling, right? Like that phase where like you've been in business for a while and you're ready to go to the next level and what it takes to get there and some of the levers you're pulling to get there. And yeah, I'm just really excited to kind of unpack your experience. Before we do that, can you please just give people in your own words a sense for your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started the Perfect Match Weddings in the summer of 2020. I went to college and graduated in the COVID era in 2020 and went to school for public relations and communications and really thought that that was the field I was going to go into. I wanted to work in events specifically and publicity for events. And as we know, during that time frame in COVID, a lot of live and in-person events weren't happening. And so I kind of pivoted while I was getting my master's online to work for a local wedding planner, doing some behind the scenes things just to kind of pick up some extra income and as another job, and really fell in love with it. Have always been a fan of weddings. I think I was definitely the stereotypical girl growing up that always dreamed of their wedding and, watched Say Yes to the Dress and all of that, and really fell in love with kind of that combination of creativity and organization that comes along with wedding planning, and decided when I transitioned out of that role to leave my full-time job in public relations and start this thing on my own. And once I launched in the summer of 2020, about 6 months later, I left my full-time job in PR and went full-time with wedding planning.
That is so cool. Is it what you dreamed of it being, Sam?
It
If I may
is.
ask just a very forward, is it?
It
Tell me
is.
more.
I feel so lucky every day to wake up and get to do a job that I really love, and I don't dread going to work. Every day is different. I really love that balance, as I mentioned, of that creative side, but also that organizational side. I'm a very type A person, so I feel like I really thrive in this environment. But I think that, when I was going through being a bride myself in 2024 and getting married, there's part of me that was like, maybe it's not all it's cracked up to me. Maybe I won't love it, as much as I make it out to be for my couples. And I had such a wonderful wedding experience of my own. I feel like it's just really made my job that much more meaningful every day to try to give that to our couples.
That's really cool. I think there's a beautiful quote by Oprah that I can't quite remember, but I do remember the gist of it. It's that if we're walking around thinking about what we don't have, we're never going to be happy because you can never have enough. But if you just focus on what you do have, you can really be happy and just live in a state of gratitude. And I think it's so easy, especially, I talk to planners, like it's such a stressful job for all of us. Like it's easy to take for granted that like doing something you love is so valuable. I feel like there are a lot of people in this world, for various reasons that don't get to do that. And it's just really cool to hear you earnestly, kind of express that
Yeah.
sentiment.
Yeah. No, I feel very lucky. And I have a lot of, friends and, acquaintances that unfortunately don't love their job every day. And I always encourage
Yeah,
people to, if you have the means to, and that flexibility to go for that dream, because life is short and we might as well enjoy what we're doing every day.
it sure is. Yeah, it's so random on that note, but I was lying in bed last night, like my mind was just kind of churning as it tends to do at the end of the day. And I just randomly went back. I finished high school in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and I was looking up all these friends that like my dad, who's now passed away, had, and my grandfather. And they're like, they're gone. And it just hit me like so many of them, like the majority of them have passed away. And I'm like, wow, like this is not a dress rehearsal. Like you got to go big, like do what you're going to do. That said, it's easy to say that, Sam, and harder to do it. What really allowed you to take that courageous leap and to follow your passion and to now be doing this full time the way you are?
Yeah, it was definitely a scary decision. And, 6 months into the business isn't that far in. So in hindsight, it was like, oh, that was a quick jump. But those 6 months were agonizing in the sense that I really wasn't enjoying my full time job. And I really knew that I wanted to make that leap. So every day that I was still waking up and doing this job that I didn't love and trying to
Right.
squeeze in wedding planning at night and on the weekends,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
just felt like such a long process. And I went back and forth a lot with, my now husband, boyfriend at the time of like, when is the right time to make that switch for us financially, for the business? Is it a certain number of revenue or income that you wait for, a certain number of weddings per year? And ultimately, I wish it was a better story, but I just kind of got to the point where I was like, enough is enough. I want to make this leap. I don't want to be unhappy every day. And I think part of it was also, I felt like I couldn't grow the business more without having that time. And I'm really lucky that it all worked out and it paid off. And I was able to continue to grow the business and have it be, a successful, stable income for us. But, I work with a lot of couples in my own mentorship program where I mentor new planners, where they ask me that same question of how do you know it's the right time? And I think it's very different for everyone based on kind of what scenario you're in for you and your family.
I agree. And it's funny, so many thoughts as you were talking. But Sam, I've three companies that I founded. And I remember when I left my law firm job and my mom was like, oh, Eddie, no, like it was such a scary thing. And I feel like, and this will probably resonate with you, we're going to talk a little bit about, being a mom and having a kid and all of that. But like, I don't know that you're ever ready, right? To leave that security blanket of that paycheck and to like, because, and I love that quote by MLK where he's like, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. But like, you never see the whole staircase. So it's inherently like a little scary. But I love the way you're talking about that. And your PR background, I can't let that go, right? Like, how has that impacted your ability to grow your company?
I think there's a lot of crossover, a lot of shared skills, and I think at first it was kind of
Mm,
this sense of not failure, but like, oh, they was in this good program in school, and you pay a lot for your education. I'm like, oh man, I'm not using it, quote unquote, every day, but I really am. And the longer I've been in this business, the more I've realized that a lot of those skills are transferable. Whether that be networking with people or communicating with our clients, managing marketing, excuse me, and social media. There's a lot of crossover. So I do think it's really benefited me to have that background.
And what could you say, Sam? I mean, obviously, there's no, download button or transmit button you can hit that's going to give, our listeners all of the experience that you've gotten from, your work in PR. But if you could distill down maybe a couple of things that some other wedding planners who don't have your background in PR might be able to hear and apply to their business to be a little better, what would you share?
I would say the marketing and the social media piece, because communications is all of that, right? Public relations, all of that is related. I think that's played a big piece in launching my business. Now, as I'm sure we'll talk about today with scaling, it's a piece I feel like I don't have as much time for and need to kind of hire out
Mm,
for.
mm,
But the other
mm-hmm.
piece specifically in public relations, and when I worked in that role, when we're pitching stories to publications and we're trying to get media coverage for our clients, I think that piece relates in kind of an unexpected way in weddings where we're almost kind of pitching our client to vendors or vice versa and trying to tell that story of what's the couple's love story and why do you want to be a part of their day, and vice versa for vendors of, this is what this vendor stands for and this is their style and this is what they can offer, and kind of creating those relationships together to make sure that everyone is a good match.
Very cool. Before we get into scaling, which you're right there, like we're about to dive into that, but I don't want to move on without at least asking, how has it shaped you and your business? You know, the fact that you got started when you did, that you went through the pandemic, like, how do you feel like that kind of shaped you as a wedding pro and planner?
Yeah, I think that I was very fortunate to been one of the few to have benefited from the pandemic. As
Hmm.
terrible as it was, and how many events had to be canceled, the timing of when I joined the industry, the end of 2020, moving into 2021, when
Hmm.
our business really started to grow, that's when couples were starting to reschedule their weddings. Or
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
weddings that were going to be in 2021, people held off and waited until
Hmm.
2021, 2022 to get
Hmm.
married.
Hmm.
That really helped
Hmm.
us hit the ground running. I think we had about 20 to 25 weddings in our first year, which was, it's crazy to think back on that. Right away we got that experience with
Yeah.
a variety of couples and venues, and I don't know that we would have been that quickly integrated into the industry had we not joined at a time when so many people had this kind of backlog to get married. So I think that that helped, and I also think that our specialty for weddings specifically are private residence, tented weddings, blank slate venues where we're kind of building these venues from the ground up. And that was a lot of what was happening in 2021 because there were so many regulations around events for COVID. A lot of people were
Right.
doing private residence and tented weddings. So we were thrusted right in. Our first couple weddings were tented weddings, and those are some of the hardest events to produce. So we got that experience early on and really understood the value of how hard those events can be and what it takes, and learned that that's really our niche.
Really cool. Yeah, it is. It's crazy. Anytime I stop and just reflect on that period, it was just so unprecedented. And so I guess, Sam, to turn to, the big sort of topic that I want to dive into with you, because I know this is something that is going to appeal to, like, bullseye dead center for, like, a good percentage of our listeners. You reach a point where you followed your passion as a wedding planner. You're like, this lights me up. I'm doing it. I love it. And then you get in business. You're sustaining yourself. You're even full time, and you're like, okay, where's the next level here, right? Like, how do I reach that point where I'm running my business and it's not running me? How do I reach a point where I'm getting the profitability that I want? Start to talk to me about your mindset evolution. Like, how and when did you find yourself getting to this point where you're like, all right, I want to reach the next level, so to speak.
Yeah, I would say those first 3 to 4 years were, like I said, we hit the ground running. We had a lot of business. It was kind of just learning as we go and surviving. And I was like, this is great. We're busy. That means business is going well. That's kind of what I equated with success. And as we continued to grow, and I realized that I wanted to kind of have more of that niche toward a higher end market, toward private residence weddings, I really started to understand the need to shift that marketing to appeal to specific clients, and realize that we could provide a much better service if we were specific about what we were providing and not just trying to appeal to everyone. So that was kind of the first thing around 2024 that started that shift. And then 2025 was our most successful season yet, in terms of, the types of couples, the events we produced, revenue. It was a really great year for us. And it was also the year that we welcomed our first baby. I had my daughter in September of 2025. And, when I found out I was pregnant with her in January of 2025, the beginning of last year, that was really when it clicked for me that I can't just
Mm,
kind of keep going nonstop, working
mm,
24/7. There had to be some
mm.
boundaries in place, whether that was, the amount of time I was working, or hiring people, or limiting the number of events and increasing revenue. My mind just started to kind of turn with how I could make this sustainable with having a family and having a work-life balance. And I think that hesitation before was, I was always someone who was an advocate for work-life balance, but because I enjoyed my career so much and still do, I thought, well, I don't have to have that balance because I like working. So it's not something I dread. But I've realized over the past year that that balance is still very important. So that's kind of where this shift started for me.
That makes a lot of sense. And I was thinking as you were talking, Sam, I don't think I'd ever just kind of named this or articulated it to myself, but more than any other profession I can just think of easily off the top of my head, wedding planners, or at least a meaningful percentage of wedding planners, actually go into this profession and approach it from the vantage point of like, this is going to let me do something I love, but also be the wife and mom that I want to be. Again, I know this isn't everybody, but I know there is this percentage. And that's like really a beautiful thing when you can kind of mesh those two things together. How's that going so far? And we'll talk a little bit more about like being a mother, being a business owner. I'll come back to it. But just for now, like, how do you feel at this point you're kind of navigating this very big change in period, for you?
Yeah, I mean, to be candid, it's tough. It's uncharted
Yeah.
territory. I've tried to lean on, other wedding industry pros and business owners as much as possible because I think it's just such uncharted territory of, my husband works a 9 to 5, he works from home. I have a lot of help and flexibility there, but it's just kind of this in between ground, right? Of like, well, I hear a lot of people say, it must be so nice. You're a business owner, you have flexibility, you can arrange your
Mm,
schedule. And while that's true and that's great, and I don't take that for granted, you and I both know as business owners, we're also kind of on the clock 24/7. There's no
absolutely.
days off or time where you can clock out and say, I need to take a sick day or whatever. My daughter didn't sleep all night, whatever it may be.
Right.
We're still kind of that person on call. So, it really comes down to what boundaries you put in place for yourself to kind of continue keeping that healthy balance.
I'm gonna probably go back and forth here between like this notion of parenting because, and this is the thing with business, like when there is no bright line of demarcation between personal and business the way it is when you're going into like corporate America punching a clock. Like
Right.
those lines are like very porous. Um, so I'm not surprised either that one of the things that comes with the gift of a child is I think like this heightened sense of like motivation and just kind of like, wait a minute, what am I doing? It's not just me, I've got a family. And tell me how that started to take shape for you, Sam, in terms of like, okay, I know I want to level up, I know I need to make some changes here. What did your brain start telling you to do as next steps?
Yeah, I think the first thing I thought of, even before my daughter was here, when I found out what I was pregnant was my first thought is always our couples, whether that's positive or
Mm.
negative. We love our couples so much. And I think that's part of our struggle here, right? As a business owner is like, we want to give everything to them. So that was my first thought is how am I going to make sure that they're taken care of when I'm out on maternity leave, when I have the baby, I want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that they are still getting the best experience possible and what they're paying for by working with us. So it really started by taking our team, and I have a great team of typically wedding day assistants prior to this, and I took the time to
Mm-hmm.
train them and kind of help them level up so that they'd be in a successful position to execute the remainder of our packages while I was on maternity leave.
Mm-hmm.
So that team building part was really the biggest thing, and then that kind of led into how do we scale from here? Whether that be taking on multiple weddings per weekend, or having people take on different roles within the company, whether that be social media or design, or how do we utilize this to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that everyone is not spread too thin, but working in
Mm-hmm.
their areas of success.
That's very, very cool. So I guess, and I know too, because we talked about this as well, you are taking a page, right out of the book that I always preach from, which is if there's something that you want to do, find somebody that's done it and get their playbook. In other words, if you want to grow a wedding planning business, scale a wedding planning business, it turns out that has been done before. So you started working with a friend of mine, Brandy,
Yes.
Gar, can you talk a little bit about what led you to seek out that sort of mentorship and that education? Because I think a lot of people get blocked and they're just like, I got to figure it all out myself, you know?
Yeah. I have been a longtime listener of Brandy's podcast, and I've been in the program now about 2 months, in
Mm-hmm.
her coaching program, and she talks a lot about scaling and growing a team, and how she's made that successful, like you said, for herself, and decided
Mm-hmm.
to again kind of just take the leap on a whim and say, all right, it's time to invest in the business. And I remember having this conversation with, my husband is not, in the business, but we have a lot of conversations about kind of what's the next step for the business. And
Mm-hmm.
um, saying to him, it seems kind of like an odd time to take on more in a way of, adding this. We have this young child at home and I'm trying to figure it all out. But I was like, this is the time. It's kind of now or never, where I'm either going to continue to grow this business and make it work with our family and our new lifestyle, or it's going to kind of fall to the wayside and become a hobby. And Brandy talks about that a lot, of not running your business like it's a hobby and really running it like it's your career. So that kind of gave me the push I needed to take the next step. And I've been in the program about 2 months now, and definitely still figuring it out. And I have a lot of things to learn and continue to grow with, but they've been such a helpful resource in kind of answering a lot of those niche questions as you build your business. And you're like, what should I do about this specific scenario? And it's not really something you can just Google and find out.
Um, everything you're saying, amen. I have a sense for what the answer to this question is going to be, but I'm going to say, you tell me agree or disagree and why. Investing in yourself as a wedding planner is one of the most valuable things you can do.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, I think that we, just as in any other profession, need to keep investing in our education to keep growing and providing the best service to our couples and therefore, our employees if we're having a team. So I think that investing in ourselves is definitely one of the best ways to continue growing.
As a wedding planner, you know how important it is to create detailed wedding day timelines for your events. But creating your timelines can be a tedious and time-consuming job. Until now. Because Timeline Genius lets you create beautiful, detailed wedding day timelines with ease. And it keeps everything you need on the wedding day in one central place. Here's how it works. First, Timeline Genius saves all your clients, vendors, and venues in your Rolodex, so you don't lose time looking for their information. And when you're ready to create a new timeline, you simply enter the key information for your wedding. Click a button, and voila! Timeline Genius magically gives you a customized timeline for your event, where all the details are laid out and the times are calculated for you. From there, you can easily edit your timeline by adding or deleting items, inserting images, changing font styles, and customizing everything to your liking. You can also instantly shift the times for as many items as you want. And when it comes to your clients and vendors, Timeline Genius lets you give them the highest level of service. You can send them tailored timelines, showing only the items they're involved in. And you can collaborate by inviting them to a mobile-friendly, web-based version of the timeline. You can even set text message reminders to automatically go out on the wedding day. And once you've completed your perfect timeline, you can download it or email it out as a beautifully styled PDF. And that's Timeline Genius, a smart software that will help take your wedding planning to the next level. Start your free trial today.
And so this would be an opportune time for me to also mention that you, Sam, provide mentorship yourself.
Yes.
And people may say, well, heck, if she's being trained, how is she trained? Because there are different stages. It goes back, and you can correct me if any of this is wrong, but find the person who's done what it is you're trying to do. If you're new to ice hockey, you don't need Wayne Gretzky to be your coach.
Right.
Like, in fact, he's probably not your guy. You need to learn how to skate and whatever I don't play ice hockey, but like, you get the metaphor. Tell me a little bit more about the mentorship that you provide, and talk about that just for a minute.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that, because I almost get kind of that imposter syndrome myself sometimes, of I'm like, wait a minute, I'm in a program and I still have so much that I don't know and I'm learning. But at the same time, looking where I am now, 5-6 years into the business from where I started, I do have a lot to offer to new business owners and new wedding planners. And it really came, the beginning of this program came from me just looking back and being like, wow, I wish there was someone I could talk to and ask these questions as I was starting my business and get those answers and kind of peel back the curtain. And I had a lot of new planners that were reaching out to me and saying, hey, do you offer internships or mentorship programs? And I was like, I don't, but it's something that I really enjoy talking about and helping people kind of with that first step of even the simple things like, how do you get an LLC started? What do you pay your most basic help? You have an assistant on day one of a wedding. How do you create a contract? All of those little things to start your business that really set the tone for how it's going to go. I just felt like that was an area that I could provide some assistance. And it's been a really rewarding experience so far.
I just want to say, and I love everything you're saying. It makes more than lucid sense to me, but there's no, absolutely zero imposter syndrome warranted by the fact that you're continuing to seek out coaching. I was listening to, I think it's called like the CEO, Diary of a CEO, or whatever podcast. This guy, he had Tony Robbins on there. He's like, Tony's now making $12 billion a year, with his companies. He talks about Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce, how Mark kept coming to these, trainings that Tony was doing and had him as a coach, all this stuff. And I'm just like, the people that are growing at every level, they still have coaches, right? And when you stop investing, I would almost be more suspicious of you saying, hey, you need to invest in your education with me if you're like not doing the same
Right.
to continue to grow your own skills. And it's ultimately, again, it's just about coaching that part that really well.
Right.
And this path, like that. You're like, I just did that. I know it like the back of my hand. If somebody's there, I can help them. It must be really gratifying, though. How do you balance the time, like with, like all of the buckets?
It's a balancing act for sure, but it's something that I really enjoy. I feel like I've created a lot of great relationships with the people that I have mentored, and it's been so great to watch them succeed and watch them, take on their first full service package or expand their rates or grow their team. And it's just been really rewarding to watch that growth. So I think that part makes it a lot easier to balance.
Very, very cool. Very cool. I mean, I'm just going to keep bouncing around because, again, all of this stuff just connects and ties together in my mind. But kind of going back to this notion of taking your company to the next level, Sam, um, when we say next level, it can be kind of like a vague idea, right? If you were to put some more color and clarity into that idea, like what does the next level look like, in terms of your ambitions from where you are now? Like, what's the next level look like for you?
Yeah, I think that it's a couple of different things. I think the team piece that we've touched on a little bit is a big part of that for me.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to have people on my team that are experts in their areas, whereas right now, and like I said, I'm still very much growing and learning this, but right now, or a lot of times at the beginning of owning a business, you're one person doing it all, right? You're doing HR and marketing and the actual planning and, all of the things. And so having some boundaries there where I can focus on the things I'm really good at and bring in people that are really good at other things and help us to all succeed together. I think that's one area. And then I think, in the planning itself a little bit more and kind of that niche is just really making sure that we are taking on couples that we align with. And as I've grown, I think I've realized more that it's not necessarily about quantity. It's more about quality of the couples and the events that we produce. So knowing how to look for those red and green flags when talking with couples, adjusting our marketing to make sure that we're the right fit, because that's when we can really offer the best service to our couples, as opposed to just saying, yes, yes, yes to everyone. We can do anything and everything. There's other people out there that could probably do that job better, if they're not our ideal client. So I think that it's a tough thing to learn because you want to be able to say yes to everyone, but it's been a good learning experience.
I preach that. You listen to the podcast, so you've probably heard me wax on about that very notion. And it is hard. It's counterintuitive. I say that because I, as a business owner, had to learn it too, a bit of the hard way. But what a valuable thing. Like, speak to the person that you know who you're for and who you're not explicitly for. Is that something that Brandy helped kind of instill in you, or did you get that just through your own hard knock experience? Like, how did you kind of what made you assimilate that lesson?
I would say a little bit of everything, like to be honest, listening to your podcast, listening to Brandy, listening to other planners in the industry, learning through experience of having not so great experiences with clients that weren't the best fit and realizing, oh, that's, by no one's fault of just kind of like, that's not we're not able to offer this client the best experience because they don't align with what we offer. I think it's a combination of all of those things. But the more you do, I always say to even our mentees in our program, every single wedding you learn something of what to do and what not to do. So the more you're around, the more you learn.
Sam, if I gave you a time capsule, you can go back. I'm going to open up a portal, take you right back to the day you were, like, I'm doing this thing. I'm going to start this company. What would you say to your, past self if you were trying to just hook her up as much as possible
I would say that I should have charged more money
right from the
right
start?
from the start. And I talk about this a lot with my mentees, and I don't think that anyone should be charging, way more than their experience worth. It's not that we're trying to rip
Right.
couples off in any way, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
going back to
Mm-hmm.
kind of that imposter syndrome, there's this idea of, well, I'm new and I don't know what I'm doing, so I shouldn't charge that much, or I'm probably not worth that much. And
Mm-hmm.
looking back, you kind of kick yourself of, I really was providing a pretty good service, and it may not be the level that it is at today, but I think that I was definitely undercharging for the time. And you live and you learn. But that's something I always try to encourage my mentees, is to try not to undercut themselves too much, because they are, they're probably in this industry because they're good at what they do, and they have value to give to their clients.
There are really just these like commonplace things that I feel like apply to people across the board, no matter what industry you're in. And
Absolutely.
another one is just charging what you're worth.
Yes.
I think we all kind of just have, it's human nature, and we're conditioned, I think, by society to be like, now don't go imposing on people, and don't be like strutting around like you're the stuff, like, be modest. So we kind of are naturally, kind of conditioned to be like, well, is this dollar amount okay?
Right.
When in reality, like, you kind of, can you tell me a little bit more? If you would have said that to your former self,
Yeah.
which suggests to me that originally you weren't charging what you should have been, but that you have learned over the years how to kind of lean into your worth. Can you tell me about that sort of evolution? How did you get to the place where you are now on that
Yeah.
mindset wise?
Yeah. And I think it was a lot of trial and error, like you mentioned at the beginning, of like, here's this dollar amount. Like, are they going to go for it? Does this make sense?
Right.
You're kind of making it up, which is like crazy
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
admit. And, now,
Yeah.
now through, other planners and experience, and the program with Brandy, we've had a lot more experience of kind of figuring out where those numbers come from, and what makes it a
Right.
profitable package, and all of
Right.
those things. But at the beginning, you are just kind of hoping that, couples think that your value, that you have that value. And I think that,
Yeah, it's like you don't want a couple to be like, you're not worth it.
right, right.
Like, you're almost like, what if they say that? Like,
Exactly. And I remember early
yeah,
on,
yeah.
one of my first full service couples, I was having a consult with them, and they ended up booking, and it was a great wedding and everything, but it was very, very early on. And I remember the mother of the bride saying to me during the consult, you seem great. Why don't you charge more? And I was like, oh,
Oh,
that was
wow.
kind of the first time I was like, oh, I guess I
Wow.
could be charging more. And I remember responding to her and saying, this was very true, but I was saying, I want everyone to be able to afford a wedding planner. And I think that that's a service everyone should be able
Mm,
to get. And while I do believe that, it was the first time I kind of realized, wow, I'm undercharging, and I'm sure they're interviewing other people that are charging a lot more than this. And from there, I started to really take a deeper look at there's more to the business than just what I'm paying myself, and starting to really understand what the role of a business owner is, and all the expenses that go into that, and the overhead and the staff expenses, and just all of these different things, that it's not just this arbitrary number that we come up with and we pocket it all at the end of the day. So understanding the ins and outs of your business is kind of the first step I think you need in order to figure out what you should be charging.
well, I love that your mind went to that, Sam, because I think that, like, when you look back at the beginning, like this, for this CEO mindset, right? That Brandy, that I like, that like definitely preach, is it's really kicked off by your pricing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when the rubber meets the road, like, practically speaking, if you're not charging what you're worth, then the machine just doesn't get built and it doesn't work. Like, can you speak to that a little bit from your own personal experience?
Yeah. I mean, especially with being in it as their full-time job, it's it's easy to look at it like we've talked about with Brandy, kind of having this like hobby mindset, or this is something I'm good at and I can bring in a little money. But when this is your primary income, especially when you're going from a salary to this, you need to make sure that it's sustainable and it's something that you and your family can survive off of. And in weddings specifically, there's a lot of ebbing and flowing with the seasonality of the business and how far in advance people book and deposits and all of those things. So I think that understanding what that number actually is in order to make not only your business sustainable, but your personal life and your family is important. It's an important element of the whole recipe.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the profit just has to be there. Like we can do this for love and we should, and I'm glad. I love that this whole industry is centered around love and all the things, but if you're not making a profit, you can just run yourself ragged,
Right.
and not be making what you deserve. One thing that's interesting, I think, Sam, about our chat is that you are kind of in this transformational sort of phase with your business. And um, I assume there are certainly, things that you still kind of have on your to-do list, like objectives that you want to reach, but probably also that you've already pulled a few levers that have implemented changes in your business that kind of go to this concept of leveling up. Can you tell me what are some of the things that you feel like you've done over the last 6 to 12 months that are like, okay, now I actually have more of a business than the hobby that I sort of started out doing?
Yeah. I would say one goes back to that pricing again. And, we offer 3 different levels of packages to our clients, the highest being full service planning. And within the last year, I've really gotten a lot more comfortable with percentage-based pricing for our
I was going to
clients.
ask about that.
Yeah. And that was something that, I had heard about a lot, but never really felt confident pitching to our clients and explaining to them the value behind it. And it's something that I've gotten a lot more
Yes.
comfortable with in the past year. And it's definitely been liberating for me in the sense that as weddings continue to scale, as they often do, I don't have that sense of resentment anymore that could build up of like, geez, I only
Mm,
charged X amount and now this
mm,
budget has doubled and we're, working 5 days
mhm,
on site and now I need 5 employees there and I'm not making any money at the end of the day, and now
mhm.
I feel much better equipped to say yes to the client because I know that our team is going to be compensated appropriately. So that's been one big jump in terms of kind of leveling up in terms of pricing.
I encourage anybody, and we can post this in the show notes, but I've done a couple of really powerful podcasts about that. I was thinking about it before you even mentioned it, Sam, but Brooke Keegan, we did an episode with her, and Sasha Souza actually talked a lot about the impact years back when I talked to her about the impact. Like that was kind of like the transformation, like inflection point when she changed
Yeah.
her pricing model. What about your systems and infrastructure? Like,
Mm.
how are you thinking now with your newly acquired sort of CEO mindset um, about your systems and processes?
Yeah, that's been a big one specifically in the last 2 months or so of being in the program. Brandy's program has really encouraged me to automate as much as possible. I use
Mm-hmm.
HoneyBook for our our inquiries and our contracts and all of that for our
Mm-hmm.
CRM. And I was still doing a lot of things manually. And it was something that during my very first success call with the program, they were like, you're still like responding manually to all of your inquiries. And I'm like, yeah, I just stop whatever I'm doing and I get on my computer and I respond right away. If I'm on vacation, if I'm at a wedding, like whatever I need to do, I respond to that inquiry. And they're like, Sam, you can't be doing that. And it was something that I resisted for a long time because I didn't want to feel like I wasn't being personal. That's something that really is a big pillar of our
Mm-hmm.
brand, is that, you're
Mm-hmm.
getting Sam, you're talking to Sam, she's going to make you feel taken care of and special and all of these things. And I didn't want our couples to stop feeling that. I didn't want them to feel like just another number. But I've found that since I've set up automation and I've really tweaked that wording and that language to feel like it still embodies that feeling of taking care of our couples, it's also given me so much more freedom to be, this past week we were in Disney World with our family and I'm on rides and I'm getting inquiries and they're being automatically
Oh
responded to,
man.
and I didn't feel like, oh, I need to rush back to the hotel and get on my computer and answer these people. They were taken care of right away and I didn't have to worry about it.
I feel like, Sam, so much of business boils down, like many other things, from basketball to whatever thing in life, like to fundamentals, right? And there's this one fundamental thing that like I always have to like remind myself of and remind my like our job, like your job is not just to plan weddings. Like
Right.
you're also a business owner, and that means your job is to put the people and the systems in place to render the service that is needed, right?
Right.
Like, so sometimes it's you doing the thing, other times it's you taking the time to educate yourself on what tools are out there and how they work and to put a system like what you just said in place. And when you do that, it's just amazing. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, I can be over here at Space Mountain while,
Right.
inquiries are getting answered. I'm sure you know where this is going to a little bit, Sam, because I also, I know that you are a Timeline Genius user. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yes.
And I don't want you to say anything just because, like, oh my gosh, Eddie's so cool. I got to tell him nice things. But really, like, you're talking to other planners right now. Can you talk just candidly about Timeline Genius and how that kind of fits into your systems and processes?
Yeah, and I'm not just saying this, I mentioned this in the pre-interview. I'm a huge Timeline Genius fan. We've been using it for about 2.5 years now. And this was one of those next steps that I took in my business where I was doing a lot of things manually and, creating documents and sending things over email. And I just needed a place to have a really great looking, clean interface for our couples and our vendors where we could put everything in one place. And since starting with Timeline Genius, we've received really great feedback from our vendors and our couples specifically that they feel like they know where to go. They have one link. They can go and see everything. It's collaborative. They can leave comments and questions in there. So I feel like that was one of those, while it wasn't necessarily automation, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, I just needed to bite the bullet and really get into a program that met all of those needs instead of me having to manually do these things time after time with each client.
That makes sense, Sam. And from your vantage point, I'm always just intellectually curious about this because my whole, that thing that you get that lights you up when you were talking about your couples, like I get that from talking to planners, right? When I'm like, okay, we built something here that really is helping just amazing people like you do what you do. If you had to kind of, from your vantage point, say what is the biggest benefit of Timeline Genius, what would you point to?
I would say that's a great question. I would say, as I mentioned, kind of having that one link where everyone can go for
Mm-hmm.
one thing is really huge. I think there can be so many documents, and you can get so bogged down with email chains that, especially during the planning process, that at least at the very end, if nothing else, I have this one link I can send to everyone and say, here's everything you need to know about this wedding. And that's kind of how I explain it to our couples too, is, if there were ever, knock on wood, a scenario where, last minute I couldn't be there or something at your wedding, there's so much information in this one link, in this one document, that pretty much anyone who takes that
Mm-hmm.
on has everything there that they need to know about your wedding day. It's kind of like their wedding day Bible. They can access it on their phone. They can access it on their iPad. We can text the PDF link to each other. There's a lot of benefits of that ease of access for everyone.
It's funny, Sam. People say that over the years because when I first started Timeline Genius, you can imagine it was all about like the pain that I discovered was like planners were like, it takes a lot of time.
Yep.
It's tedious. I'm moving things around. I don't want to make a mistake. And I was initially very focused on like saving the time, which is still very critical. I'll go to my
Sure.
grave saying like your time is like immensely important and you can't get it back once it's spent. But over the years, what you're saying has emerged as this sort of narrative that like it's my professionalism,
Mm-hmm.
and it's quite simply just having everything in one place. I can't tell you how many planners have said, I want to if I got hit by a bus, I still want to have a timeline that's so detailed that everything runs without a hitch. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being a Timeline Genius customer. But yeah, I love getting that sort of candid, unvarnished feedback, especially for others to hear, because I can never put it in the words of a planner, even though this
Yeah.
is what I've done with my life for the last 12 and a half years.
Yeah.
Um, I have to go back, Sam, because I have two kids, now 8 and 11. But when you told me, you have a baby, I immediately like just have so many like flashbacks of what that period was like, and it was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. And wedding planning is already crazy. So when
Right.
you layer crazy on top of crazy, tell me, like, bring me inside your world, as a mom and planner.
It really is crazy. That's the best way to describe it. There's not a lot of sleep happening over here. We're tired, but we're figuring it out. I mean, it's amazing. It's the most rewarding thing. It's always been the goal, and I'm so happy that that's kind of the stage of life that we're in. But it's definitely a balancing act. Making it through the heat of the summer of wedding season last year, 8, 9 months pregnant was a challenge for sure. And I think so much of like knowing when my husband and I wanted to start a family, the wedding industry and my job was the first thing on my mind of like, how are we going to time this perfectly so that I don't miss a wedding and the business doesn't get impacted and I don't let any couples down. And I think that kind of goes into this whole mindset shift of like, yes, I love this and I love my career, but at the end of the day, family is so important. And this is something that I knew that we wanted for us and our future. And that kind of comes with some shifts to the business in order to make all of those things possible.
Yeah, I remember when I was practicing law, I was a, junior associate, and this was still back when I'd go out every Friday and Saturday and sleep in and all these things. And I went into the senior associate's office who had recently had a kid, and I was like, "What's it like?" He's like, "Well, okay, let's say that you like sold everything you own and you moved to a deserted island." He's like, "It's about as big of a change as that." I was
Yeah.
like, I got you, man. I'm going to go back to my office. I think I get it.
Yeah. It's a big
But it
change.
really, it is. I feel like it comes with these, like, it's kind of like this. Well, you tell me, like, in terms of your productivity, are you kind of grappling? I saw my wife kind of go through this with, like, wait a minute, I used to be able to do blah, blah, blah. And when is it going to get back to that? By the way, it's never going to get back to that. But, like, like, are you grappling with that at all? Or,
Yeah.
yeah, how's
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people said to me, before they still say to us like, oh, it must be nice, to have the business and be able to have that flexibility. And while I'm very fortunate to be home with my daughter every day, it's definitely hard because I used to, like you said, go and I would sit at my desk from 9 to 5 or whatever every day. And I would have that uninterrupted time to do my work and answer emails. And if a client call came in or a vendor, like I had that freedom to jump on whenever. And it really just takes a lot more scheduling now and being intentional about those hours and squeezing things in at nap time or in evenings or whatever. But also I do think that my productivity in a way has increased as much as there's more
right?
distractions. It's like when I do get that
Mm-hmm.
time, I could probably get the amount of work done in 2 hours that I was getting done in 8 hours before. So you definitely,
Right.
you lock in and you focus and you get it done when you have that opportunity too.
Is there anything, Sam, because you mentioned, and I suspect you're not alone in this way, you mentioned that like that was always the plan. Like that was kind of your vision for your life, that you were going to be a mother,
Yeah.
you were going to have this family. I'm sure there are other people out there that, even though they haven't, reached the point that you have, they kind of see that as their life path. Is there anything that they could be doing in advance to prepare? I don't think you're ever going to be fully prepared, but are there
Yeah.
any steps you could take to kind of prepare a little bit more for this path?
I think having systems in place for, if you're a business owner, having systems in place where you are not the only way that your business can run. So whether that be
Mm,
automations or hiring team
mm-hmm,
members or having boundaries in
mm-hmm.
place so that you don't feel like if you are out of commission for whatever reason, that the business can't run. I think that was the biggest stressor throughout the pregnancy, the maternity leave, of just like, what's going to happen if I'm not there. So I think that the earlier you can get those things in place, the more confident you'll feel going into that transition.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's funny. I really firmly believe that we can all learn from everybody's got something to teach, right? And certainly, for you, having been in business for years, you're teaching other people, and still growing and learning as you go, as well as we all should be. Um, what do you kind of look back, and I know there's so much ahead of you, Sam, and you have dreams and you're leveling up as we speak, as you look back, um, at the, success that you've enjoyed already, Sam, what factor would you point to if you had to point to one factor that was like responsible for the success that you've enjoyed building your company?
I would say perseverance. I think that just really being a go-getter and continuing to push through challenges that arose and figuring things out as I go, has led me to be able to continue the business. I think a lot of people get to a certain point and they're like, this is going to be great. I'm going to be able to work whenever I want and it's going to be so easy. And then they kind of realize what the business ownership actually entails. And I think that can sometimes be where things drop off. I think my perseverance to keep going. And it's a quality that I feel like I've always really embodied throughout school and throughout my early career that's kind of helped me get to where I am now.
Where does it come from, Sam? Because I agree, just listening to you, I'm like, that grit, that determination it just goes so far when you're like, no, this is what I'm doing. I'm all in. I can get knocked down and I'm getting right back up. Like, I think, that's the stuff movies are made of, right? That have you just kind of tearing up when like Rudy takes the field and he's just like, he did it. Yeah, Rudy,
Yeah.
but where does that grit and determination come from for you?
I don't know. I don't know if there's one like particular time or thing that happened, but I think that was kind of always
Mm.
instilled in us, and my sister and I as kids growing up, that our parents were just always very encouraging of like, yeah, you can do anything that you set your mind to, and what's the worst thing that can happen? Like, you try it and you don't succeed, and you'll never know if you don't try. And that's kind of always just been the mindset that I've had, is don't stop when it gets hard, just kind of continue going. And luckily it's worked out so far.
Well, I know one more kid that's about to grow up being persistent now, having asked that question.
I hope
I'm sure you will
so.
pass
I
that
hope
on
so.
to your kid. Um, and is there any beside? I know we talked about pricing, Sam, and how if I gave you that magical portal that I could probably charge like $1 billion for, if I could actually let me or anybody else go back to your former self and dispense wisdom. Are there any pitfalls that you stepped in, that you're willing to kind of share with others, again, besides the pricing thing, so that they don't step in it too?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that, specifically to wedding planning, but I think this could be applied to any business. Couples don't need you to be their yes person. They need a guide throughout the wedding planning process. And I think that one of the things that I kind of fell into at the beginning, especially those first couple years in business, was trying to be that yes person. And we talked a little
Mm.
bit about, finding your ideal client and finding the people that are for you. But I think I was so afraid to speak up when something didn't work, or when it was something that wasn't necessarily in my job description, that I was trying to take on too much. And that's where I think the burnout can start, and the resentment, and, you just can't do the things that aren't your job as well as the pro could. So I think that setting those expectations and those boundaries early are what really leads to success. So if I could go back, that's something that I would not do. And, I have a podcast of my own with my sister, who's a wedding videographer. And we talk about our early days of business a lot, and kind of laugh and poke fun at some of the early things we did. And I often talk about like, I just didn't know what a wedding planner did and didn't do. And there are times when I was, bussing tables and bagging trash and putting flowers together and all of these things that I would not be doing now. I'd be encouraging our couples to hire someone to do. I think that can be applied to any business, but just kind of knowing what your lane is and really excelling at that and finding the people that are pros in the other areas to come in and help you out.
It really makes sense. I mean, I think, we all kind of have that orientation when we look back at our less experienced selves. But what's beautiful, Sam, is just that notion of like, again, going back to, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take that first step. Like, you don't know everything at the start, and you probably will if you end up being successful. Look back and realize, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know this, that, or the other. I mean, there was a
Yeah.
time when I didn't know what a timeline was. Like, like I still remember like the first planner being like, timelines are a pain. I'm like, what's that?
What's that?
Um, but no, that's really cool. So you are a student of the podcast, so the question that I always ask people, and it's that if you could pull one thing, Sam, based on all of your experience, professional, personal, and everything, if you could give them one piece of advice to help as much as possible as they're trying to pursue their professional dreams, what would you share?
I would tell them to set expectations early with their couples if they're a planner, with their clients if they're, in another aspect of the wedding industry. Setting expectations early is the best way to avoid disappointment down the road. There's been a lot of situations, whether it be kind of going back to this notion of being that yes person or not
Mm,
having the ideal client, where
mm,
maybe those areas were a little bit gray because I wasn't sure, I didn't want to commit to something, or I didn't want to say no. And now I'm all about setting the expectations from the beginning. I'm all about having it in writing, having it in your contract, reinforcing it multiple times so that they know from the beginning, this is what I can expect to get out of this service, and this is what I can expect to not get out of it too. I think saying what you don't do and what you don't excel
mm.
at is really important too. Not necessarily to call to attention the things that you're not successful at or that you can't offer them, but more so to just say, this is the area that I really do excel. And if you need something different, I can help you get there, but I'm not the person that can provide everything under the sun for you.
I love that. Definitely love it. I also want to ask Sam, I know we talked about you and the mentorship and the coaching that you do. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And also just say, who are you for in terms of like, if there's people listening right now, like which of our listeners, what is the description of the person that you're like, look, you want to work with me because I'm going to help you. I'm going to shortcut your path to success as a wedding planner. Like, describe that person for me.
Yeah. So the ideal person that would come to us for our mentorship program is within either they haven't started their business, they're about to
Mm-hmm.
launch it, or they're within that first year.
Mm-hmm.
They want to speak with someone who has done it. They've really
Mm-hmm.
been in it, and not
Mm-hmm.
someone who did it 20 years ago and now they're just teaching,
Mm-hmm.
someone who's still in it on the day to
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to really know, like they want to ask the questions that they're too afraid to ask, and they want someone that can answer them. So they want to ask me, what are you charging? What is your profit? How many hours are you actually spending on a wedding? What's a horror story that's happened and how can I avoid it? They don't want to just hear general advice. They want really, really specific answers. I share my screen and I pull up our wedding budgets with them. I pull up my contract. I really reveal it all. And I want them to feel like they have someone that they can ask those questions to and that they don't have to hold back with.
Well, I think it's awesome that you're giving back to the industry, Sam, and sharing your experience with people. And if anybody feels like, oh my gosh, that's me, or if they just want to connect with you for any other reason, what is the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, we're big on Instagram, so you can follow us or DM us on Instagram at The Perfect Match Weddings. And then if you want to talk more about that mentorship program, or you're a couple or anyone interested in working with us, you can reach out via email at sam@theperfectmatchweddings.com or visit our website at theperfectmatchweddings.com.
Well, Sam, on behalf of our Timeline Genius community, which you're a part of, I just want to say thank you, and all of our podcast listeners on their behalf as well. Just want to say thank you. You have such a cool energy, and you're just like, I'm so happy for you as a new mom and for all the success for what you've already built. But yeah, really just a delight having you on the show.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.